Hello, this is Uvb Reptiles, and in the last video I built an enclosure for my bearded dragon Richard, and today I am going to be doing the second part of that, which involves doing the background with expanding foam and dry lock, and then setting up the inside with his water dish and the bioactive substrate, and also everything else inside. So this is how to set up a bearded dragon bioactively, and I hope you enjoy. On the inside, like I said, I'm going to use expanding foam, but I'm not going to do it like I have in the past. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep with this background. So you see, I like this wood look. It's not bad or anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect pieces to the back, but I am not going to do the entire background. I am going to use some expanding foam, but just not a whole lot. So I plan on incorporating these two pieces in somehow against the background type of thing, because I think that that would end up really cool in some way with those sticking out, but I will certainly not have them on the bottom. The goal is to have nothing really on the bottom, but dark areas that Beatrice will hide in, because Beatrice is going to be in this tank too, and I want her to be able to dig, and I want her to be able to do her thing, and I don't want her to have to worry about any type of things to move around besides just an area in the back for her to be able to hide. So mainly I want her to be able to move around, dig, do whatever she needs to, and then Richard can get up when he needs to and bask on his higher up log type deal. So the goal is to attach all the logs so they're higher up and not in the way for Beatrice or Richard or anybody, and then they can have lots of floor space and area that he can get up. But in Beatrice's case, yeah, she's not going to climb, not too much anyway. I'm pretty sure from what I've read, like the grass, like rocky grasslands, I think they come from, the Russian tortoise, which is different than the area that bearded dragons are from, but they're going to work well together. I know it. Lizards and tortoises, they can generally work pretty well together in most cases, so I'm perfectly fine with doing this, and I've seen them together before. They literally don't care about each other, and I think they'll do great together. So the goal is to build the enclosure with both of their best interests in mind, and that's what I will be doing. Before I can do the background, I have to do the drainage layer, because this build happens in layers. I needed to do the innermost part of the build before I can build out of that. So first I need the drainage layer. This is an important part of a bioactive system because it keeps the soil from being wet all the time, and this is especially important with bearded dragons that aren't supposed to be wet, but some layers of the soil are always going to be wet in a bioactive enclosure. So then the isopods and the springtails and maybe roaches or something can live in that part of the soil, and you want that to happen, but you don't want the bearded dragon to be wet. So it needs a drainage layer, and the bottom of this enclosure is pond liner, so it's going to hold water. And I had to use the drainage layer that was already in the bioactive 55 gallon for the bearded dragon, and then I added on some extra parts, and then I encased that with window screen carbon fiber mesh, because that's rather important in this case, because the bearded dragon will dig and cut through landscaping mesh and it'll ruin the drainage layer, and dirt will get into the bottom, and you don't want that. So once I had that in, I could put in the wood. All of this wood, or most of it, came from Arizona, which is an arid environment, but it's obviously not where either one of these animals are from, but it's kind of like a similar environment in a way. So two of the pieces my friend brought to me because he could put them in his car because they drove to Arizona. I've flown to Arizona twice, or 3 times actually, and 2 of the times I've brought back pieces of wood and rocks with me. So I have 2 rocks from Arizona, like large stones, and a couple pieces of wood from Arizona that I've collected from different hikes and stuff. One of the times it was actually searched, like my bag was searched, which was really interesting. because they saw all my sticks, and I had some tropical plants as well, not from Arizona. Actually, some of them were from Arizona. I had some cactuses that were from Arizona, like outside, but most of them were just like normal house plants, and they didn't do anything about it, but they did search my bag, which was interesting, probably because I had a bunch of stones and sticks in it. Then in this enclosure, I did a couple layers of expanding foam because I wanted the right amount, and sometimes you take off too much and then you need to add more and something like that. And then I also added in a hide. I didn't film it, but I used this hide that I built to fit right into the left side of this enclosure, and then I covered it with slate rock, and I glued the slate there, and then I used the dry lock, which is what I'm using to cover the expanding foam. I'm coloring dry lock to cover this wooden hide. So I just used plywood to make it, so it's plywood on the inside, but on the outside it appears much more just to be slate rock, and that's very cool. And this is made to fit Beatrice into it, and Richard can go into it as well, and they've both utilized it since I've had everything set up, so that's been going rather well. Then what I do is once everything's carved and the expanding foam is porous, then I painted it with the colored dry lock, which is like, I tried to make it like brown or gray, and then I put soil onto it so then it sticks on and it gives it more texture, and it kind of blends in with the soil that will be added in. And this is the way that I like to do these types of enclosures. I like to use expanding foam as well as soil to give it that look. Instead of using silicone like some people do, I use the dry lock because I found it to work pretty well. And it's not necessarily to keep like the water in, but in this case it does. Some people have questioned me on that. That's not why I use dry lock. It's just to adhere dirt to the expanding foam and to make it look nice. With this, the enclosure is basically done and ready to go. This was the last bit of expanding foam I had to cover, and now the enclosure is ready to install into my room. I have the bit of the background I'm going to do. Like I said earlier in the video, I like the plywood, I like the look of it, so I'm going to stick with that. But first I need to clean up my room a little bit. Here, I guess my plant fell down. I don't remember what happened with that, but I had to take care of that. I think I knocked it down while trying to get Beatrice's stuff. So Beatrice was living in a tub under my bed, which sounds awful, but it had everything she needed, and she was actually doing rather well in it. And she had like bioactive soil and everything, and I wanted to get that out so I could add that into this enclosure, as well as the bioactive soil we got out of Richard's enclosure earlier in the video. So first I need to remove all the wood that I had behind Richard's 55-gallon enclosure, because I need to store wood somewhere, and I put it in a bag and put it somewhere else in my room. Actually, I believe I put it under my bed where Beatrice was, so it all came back full circle and everything. So I had my dad help me move the thing in, and it kind of shifted to fit the stand, which was good, and it actually fit like rather well considering I just did it off of measurements, and this was the first time I had tested if it fit after I'd already done everything. So it's very good that I didn't screw anything up on that front. And then I went ahead and added in the Uvb lights. I have a solar sun bulb, a mercury vapor bulb, and then I have a 4-foot shop light with 2 different bulbs. One's an LED, the other one is a 4-foot UVB like 5.0 bulb. Both of these are the Uvb brand bulbs, and then I'm using my solar meter to test it out. Basically what I discovered is that the 5.0 puts off like a very minimal amount of UVB. It's actually generally pretty disappointing, and because it puts out some, but just doesn't go very far at all. And then the mercury vapor bulb projects it quite a lot, which is rather good, but it's like quite a lot. So I made sure that nothing was like directly under it, because even down at the base, it provides enough UVB for Beatrice. So it works out quite well. Richard can go up and bask on top of the logs and get enough UVB that way, and Beatrice can get it on the ground under that mercury vapor bulb, and that's really great. But technically the whole tank, the whole span of it has UVB, which is good. And then I added in both their soils, or at least most of both their soils. I added in a large dish for water so then they can both get to it, and I added in the last Arizona rock, as well as some slate underneath the bowl to kind of hold it in place. Adding them in this time was more of just a test to see how it would go. This was right after I set up the enclosure. The doors did not quite stay closed by themselves. I didn't have a proper locking mechanism, but I wanted to add them in, give them water, and give them the things they needed just to see how they would interact with the whole environment. As you can see there, Richard got a drink and they kind of found where they could go up and bask. I then added them in the next day once I had got cabinet locks, so the doors would lock automatically when I shut them, just with that little thing that goes in between the wheels. This way they will stay in and they can't get out in any way, and they can live in this enclosure that I built for them. I was also yet to plant the plant in the pot that was in the background that I built into the background, because I didn't want any plants to be in the ground, but I didn't want there not to be any plants. So this was the one plant in the bioactive enclosure, because I really wanted there to be something, but I knew Beatrice would destroy anything that's on the ground and possibly dig it up. Since I actually set up this enclosure many months ago, and I'm only now getting to editing it and releasing it, I should probably talk about how this enclosure has been doing, what I like and what I dislike, and how the animals have been doing, and how the bioactiveness has gone. So to start off, nothing bad has happened as far as it maintaining bioactiveness and aridness at the same time. There are giant canyon isopods in here, as well as springtails. They live in the human parts under the water bowl. They breed, they eat the old food, and they do just fine. It's completely bioactive. They also eat all of the feces that the animals produce, and there's no maintenance as far as that goes. For reference, I finished this project in March, and it is now the end of December, so it's been a long time. Richard's been doing well. He has been eating both roaches and greens. Beatrice lives at a school now, so Beatrice doesn't live in this enclosure anymore. She has moved on to a different home. I might be getting her back during the summer, but I'm not sure about that. I came in contact with somebody who is a teacher, and they were looking for a tortoise, and I was looking for less responsibility, and now Beatrice is doing well with them. But the enclosure's been doing really well. He's definitely scratched up the background a bit, but for like a year, it doesn't look too bad. At some point, I just need to get the dry lock out and recover those spots, and take them out for like a day and do that. Wouldn't be super hard. Here's a better look at things. There's Richard. Here is the mercury vapor bulb. Up here are the other lights. We have this thing. I set this up like this a couple of days ago. We have his water on top of a bunch of rocks. I want to get more slate to like create more of a thing, so then he doesn't get dirt into the water dish as much. I did remove the plant. The plant's actually up here now. It's this one. You can see because he was biting it and destroying it, and now it's doing amazing up in the leopard gecko tank. And this is the tank. It has been working out pretty well. If there were a couple things I'd like to change, I would do different doors. I don't know what I would do the doors with. I wouldn't do screen, because while it files down his nails nicely, which is kind of nice because I don't have to do that. And that's not problematic, it's just one less thing I need to do. It makes a lot of noise when he crawls on it, and he crawls on it a lot. So I would like it to be, maybe glass would be the best other option. He would scratch up plexiglass for sure, but the problem with glass is that it would still make a noise. It would just be maybe a less annoying noise. It wouldn't be like that type of noise. It would be more like when you, like a wipe on glass noise type of deal. Might not be that bad. I'm not sure. The problem with that is that I'd have to build a glass door. So maybe in the future I'll build a door, but since these are here and I have other things to worry about, that hasn't happened. Also, I added these onto the doors so then he didn't push out so much dirt onto the floor, because that was happening a lot, so that's something I had to change. That was another thing I'd change. I would have made this a heck of a lot taller, like maybe like up to here even. I know that blocks a lot of view, but I think that would just be a lot better overall if he couldn't get onto these so easily and he couldn't get dirt out so easily. I think it would just be better if it was taller. But it works very well as a bearded dragon enclosure. I like it. I want the bottom to not just be dirt. I would like to add in more leaf litter and stuff, but that's kind of how it needs to be for him because it provides him with lots of space, like open space, while also lots of places to be. And he does use the hide. Beatrice used the hide a lot, but Richard uses it every once in a while. He'll crawl down into the hide, so I'm glad I provided him with that. He can get his whole body into the hide, but bearded dragons don't normally like to hide, so it's kind of nice that he has that. And here you can see all of the isopods live down here, so they do really well in this enclosure, just in the more humid parts. And it's normally not this wet. It's really wet right now. That's just because I emptied out his water and it's pretty wet in here, but it'll dry out. It's normally dry at the surface like here and then wet underneath, which is good. That's what you want. So, and then there's some plants coming up. These are just like squash from, I give them food and sometimes they have seeds in them. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like it down below. If you have any comments or concerns, comments below. And if you're more content, then subscribe.